Welcome to Tag Happy Tips, where we're going to be talking about Motion 5's Apple software and the Scribble effect. We're now moving on to episode 2, and if you haven't checked out number 1, go and do so. Just jumping right in right now. That was a quick kind of preview of what we're going to be building. Just kind of bringing up my layers that we're going to be working on, and just kind of doing a bit of a scrub through here, getting to the section kind of where the zoom in effect begins. Cool, just selecting on that transition layer that I want to be working on. I'm then going to be going down to the paint stroke tool, just looking at the width of the brush that I want. Now I've done this a couple of times in a few other travel vlog videos, and 24 works about well. Moving up to the top right hand section of the view, I'm just going to kind of shrink the display as I'm going to be drawing over the edges. Now while I'm clicking on that layer, I'm just going to draw out. And as you can see, I've got a bit of a white line there. Just going to Inspector, into Shape, and I'm just going down to the first point offset and the last point offset, and it's kind of getting a feel of how they behave. Ultimately, I want the line to kind of a section of it to kind of come through. So I'm now just kind of slowly just keying through my timeline here to work out when I kind of want to put my last, or the keyframe for my last point in place, and just going back to the beginning, and once again just entering a keyframe there by hitting the diamond. And in this case I'm just kind of bringing down that last point offset down to 0, and as I kind of key back through, you can kind of see the last off point going from 0 up to 100%. So I've just gone 3 frames into that. Now I'm looking at the first off point where I'm just going to add a keyframe. Just going back to the timeline and just kind of keying back through it again. And I'm just going to add a second keyframe point. And that offset, I'm going to set to 0, and then moving on to the second keyframe for that first point offset, and I'm going to change that to 100. And this is the kind of effect that I'm going to be getting on the line, on the Scribble effect line. Once I've done that, I'm just going to duplicate. And before I kind of rotate it, I need to change the anchor point to be the center of my frame, because that's the anchor point that I want to be rotating my Scribble effect line around. Into Inspector, down to Properties, and under Properties, I'm just going to slowly rotate my line. Now we can't see it right now, because I've got to get my playhead above that animation. There we go. And I'm just going to duplicate that once more, back to Inspector, back across the Properties, and once again go into Rotation and slowly rotating it. Now this might seem a little tedious, however in the long run this saves a lot of time when it comes to Scribble effecting. Cool, now that I got my, what have I got there, 6 lines, just doing a bit of a scrub through, make sure I'm happy with kind of how they look, and then the pace of when they come in and go out via the zoom in transition. Okay, so I'm just going up to the, selecting on my first stroke, going into the library, followed by behavior, shape, and then randomize shape, and then just dragging across the randomize shape behavior onto my first stroke. Now I already know what type of settings I want to be playing with. Now in my earlier video I used the amount, I dropped to 5, but on this one I kept it at 10 because I wanted it to be a bit more aggressive in its movement. Once I've got my randomized shape behaviors in place, I'm then going through and selecting on each one. Once I've selected on one randomized shape behavior, I'm going up to Inspector, followed by Behaviors, and just going down and changing the random seed on each one. Just kind of collapsing that and just labeling that group. And I'm going to label that yellow lines, because eventually they will be yellow lines. I'm now going into the library, down into filters, into color, followed by colorize. I'm just going to drop that onto that group layer, click on colorize. It can either go into the HUD or into the inspector, followed by filters. And I'm going to change that color across to yellow. Just clean that up, close them down a little bit. Cool, that's looking good. I'm happy with that. Good, I'm just going to click on that, right click and duplicate that layer. Now this one I'm going to change to another color, orange. Now this is kind of where you start to really speed up on the Scribble effect through motion software. So now that I've changed that one to orange, I want to rotate it. So I've gone into the inspector and the properties and just rotating it so that's slightly kind of in between where those yellow lines are. I'm then going to go into the library, across to filters, and I'm not too sure where it is. I'm just going to select on all, and then down the bottom select on the search icon and search for flop. Yep, there it is, and I'm just going to drop that onto the orange line group, and as you can see, this flips an object horizontally or vertically in both directions. Now I don't want both of them to be playing at exactly the same time. I want the yellow one to come in first, followed by the orange one. So I'm just going to expand the timeline here. And I'm just going to move my down and collapse some of these layers just to make it a little tidy. And it's going to scrub my playhead to the left to reveal the beginning. While I'm clicking on that group, I can just literally click and drag to the right. And as now you can see the yellow come in first, then the orange. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that at the moment. I'm just going to select on the circle while shift holding and then clicking and dragging out the circle. It keeps it a nice round shape as opposed to oval. Just clicking on the circle layer, bring up the HUD, and it allows us to have a fill and outline. I'm going to get rid of the fill and just select on outline, making sure that's white. I'm just going to make that outline just a little bit bigger, similar widths to the other strokes that I've done so far. I'm just going to a bit of a scrub through it. I want to make that circle the same time as the yellow and orange lines. So I've just selected on the layer, followed by the O key on the keyboard, just to create the out point. While the circle layer is selected, I can then kind of just scrub it or move it left to right across the timeline. So that kind of pops up halfway in between the yellow and orange lines, as you can see there. I'm just going to enter in some keyframes now. So I've gone up to the inspector properties down into scale. At the beginning of the circle, I've added a keyframe by selecting on the diamond, which is now turned yellow. And now I'm just going to add a keyframe at the end of the clip. Bringing my playhead back to that first keyframe. I've just taken that down to 0 because I don't want it to be shown when it first comes in. And then I'm zooming and making it a few 100% large enough to kind of go over the shot itself, because I want it to kind of start from nothing and kind of come forward. And as we can see, we're zooming through or playing through, scrubbing through, the circle is going from small to big, but as it's getting bigger, the line is getting bigger as well, which is not what I want. So I've just gone up to the inspector, across to the shape, and now I want to kind of keyframe the width of the circle. So I've added a keyframe at the beginning of the circle layer and now at the end, and just kind of scrubbing through. And just going to make it a little bit smaller at the end, so down to, and that's a lot better, to be honest, but it's a little bit fatter through the middle, which I kind of want to take care of. Just kind of doing one more scrub here. Yeah, that's right. Now over to the right hand side, you got the three little diamond icons. Now that's kind of like the keyframe editor. So I've just clicked on that and it's kind of brought up all of our keyframes that we've done so far. Can be a little confusing. However, if we just click on the layer that we want to work with, what do we got there? There we go, the circle. It just brings up the keyframes for the circle one, and of the four that are showing, one of them is labeled outline width, which is the one I've just clicked on. Now if I kind of just highlight that and right click, it will give us an interpolation menu. Now I've already done this a few times, so I know that the logarithmic works well, but just going to show when you select on the different interpretations, as you can see, it changes how the keyframe behavior is. So just going back to my logarithmic and doing a bit of a scrub through. That's looking a bit better, to be honest, but the circle is a bit thin to begin with. So I'm just going to go back into the properties. Now what do we got here? Inspect the shape, and on that first keyframe I'm just going to increase the size and just do another bit of a scrub. No, I want it a bit bigger again. Let's try this. Yeah, I'm happy with that. That's looking good. I'm just going to collapse some of this away just to make it a bit tidier. And I'm just going to increase the display size here. So going up to the top right hand corner, clicking on the percentage, selecting fit. Now I've just selected on the circle layer. I'm just going across and placing the randomized shape on there. Now, Motion is saying, well, you've got a circle here. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to kind of add key points to make it, to allow us to do a shape on it, which is what I want to do. So I selected OK on that. Just going down and selecting the edit points for the circle. But I just need to select the circle layer, back down to edit points. There we go. And I can add additional points by double clicking on the circle itself. Now this just gives the circle a bit more of an organic freehand feel as opposed to a perfectly round circle, and it also means that the randomized shape has more points to kind of randomize against. So I've just selected on the randomized shape, gone up to inspector, down into behaviors, and I've just changed the random seed. Just bring up that timeline again, and just taking another quick look to see what all three kind of lines and circles look like. And I'm just going to go across the layer, right click and duplicate, and just drag it across. Right click, duplicate, drag it across. Now I'm not too pedantic about where I want to place these. It's a Scribble effect, it's a fast transition. I want it to have a bit of a natural organic feel to it. Just kind of scrubbing backwards and forwards and getting used to kind of the rhythm and pace of how all of those Scribble effects are kind of behaving together. Just want to kind of group these circles now. So I've kind of grouped them, and I just want to label that circle. And the white, so we want to change the color. So I've set it on the group. I'm going to go down into library, filters, color, set on colorize, and place that down. As you can see, it's taken it to a nice skin tone. Selected on the HUD, and then selected on the color. In this case, I'm just going to play through a few different ones and try and pick one that I'd like to work with. Let's give it a playback. I'm going to just tidy this up a little bit by collecting my layers of my transition and creating a new group specifically of that transition itself, which I'll just label line and circle. And getting back to the favorites folder. So this is the folder where if you drop anything into it, Motions will save that parameter, that filter, that whatever, in this case a transition that I've built, that any future kind of projects that I open, I can effectively just click and drag without having to build it out again. So I've just labeled that one AAA line circle trans. Let's just kind of move this playhead to another section of the clip. What do we got here? Yep, about here will do. And I'm just going to kind of literally just drop and drag, and it's literally taken that transition that I've built and it's now added another one into my timeline. I'm just going to just move in that, and there we go. So I've effectively built one Scribble effect transition out, and I can just replicate it out. Now, due to the way they've built it, if I then wanted to change the color of that, it's as easily as kind of just bringing down, finding the colorized filter, clicking on it, bringing up the HUD, selecting on the color, and then clicking through and changing the color to whatever you want. And there we go. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you're starting to appreciate how powerful the Motion 5 kind of Scribble effect functionality is. Now, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please stick around for the third one, where we kind of go into making a small animation. And once again, we're only really touching the beginning stages of what the Scribble effect can do in Motion. You can add kind of neon glow effects to the lines, and you can easily plug kind of this workflow into other softwares like DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, or Premiere.